Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. It's that time again, the first Friday of the month. Merry August. And as is traditional, we are here to look at the history news headlines from last month. There are updates and new news. I'll be adding this video to the History News playlist and leaving it linked in a card and below, so you can check out all of the History News headline videos from this year there, if you should choose to do so. As always, the articles discussed today will also be linked in the description box. Without further ado, let's dive into those headlines. Updates first. Last month we looked at the news that Stonehenge was in danger of losing its World Heritage status, with a warning being issued by UNESCO about a plan for a tunnel that would take a section of the apparently high traffic A303 underground. On the 30th of July, Mr. Justice Holgate found in favour of the Save Stonehenge World Heritage Site campaign to quash the order that the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps granted for the creation of the tunnel. For now, it's being reported that the project is on hold as the government considers its next steps. Here's hoping it won't involve jeopardising the heritage status or integrity of the Stonehenge site. Maybe the advice of world-leading experts in heritage and conservation will actually be listened to by the British government. Staying with Stonehenge, a new theory about how the stones were moved to their current location has been put forward by Stephen Tasker, a history enthusiast from Wales. According to the Express, quote, "He is convinced a long-forgotten machine, believed to have been used during biblical times, was used to transport the stones, and he has now recreated it to prove his theory." He told Wales Online, "It may look like something out of Last of the Summer Wine, but we've lifted a third of a ton with it. And theoretically, it could move any weight. The science behind the machine I equate to clown shoes. As long as it's over his feet, even if he is leaning over, it won't tip over. It's like a trick of the eye, and appears like it is defying gravity. The machine is inspired by one referenced in the Old Testament, where the prophet Ezekiel describes a vision of God being transported on cherubim, with 4 wings and feet shaped like the sole of a calf's foot. The next stage would be to build a full-size one, using period techniques to test the hypothesis more fully." Our next update is about the Benin Bronzes. BBC News reported that a dispute between Nigerian leaders may complicate or jeopardise the planned return of these artefacts. The great-grandson of the Oba that was toppled by the British in 1897, when this looting occurred, has spoken out against the Legacy Restoration Trust, or LRT, calling it an artificial group that was attempting to divert the return of the bronzes. It is his belief that the bronzes should be housed in a Benin Royal Museum, situated within his palace grounds, rather than in the planned Edo Museum of West African Art. To complicate matters further, the present Oba's son and heir attends meetings of the LRT. It seems that Nigerian consensus is now being discussed as a requirement for some institutions, for example, the University of Aberdeen, for them to be fully comfortable with proceeding with the returns. I'm sure there will be more updates on this dispute in due course, which I will let you know about as they come in. Michael Day's article on the Benin Bronzes for inews.co.uk turns attention towards the British Museum. The title of the article being as follows: Benin Bronzes. Britain still clings to the Nigerian artefacts, but is it on the wrong side of history? Within the article, Day explains, quote, the British Museum, in which almost 10% of the 10,000 or so Benin Kingdom artworks ended up, has so far not pledged to return or cede ownership of any of them to Nigerian authorities. It is not alone. In the case of the Royal Collection, its Benin bronze, which we discussed in last month's video, looted not once but twice in its unfortunate recent history, there is little talk and no action. An unnamed, by request, academic at the British Museum added further context, explaining that George Osborne, the former Tory Chancellor, is the new chair of the British Museum and will fight to the death to stop any repatriations. Plus, all the big public research museum directors have been told they'll lose their funding if they get any more woke. It's not just Benin. If they start there, where will it end? For a party whose members have been so vocally disdainful of so-called gesture politics, they certainly seem to be doing their fair share of it, as far as I can see. Let's move on to look at the new news. If you found me on TikTok, you may have seen my response to this headline. I think it's quite the thing. Man finds 18th century ornamental building made of teeth at the bottom of his garden, 25 years after he moved in. The recently uncovered structure is thought to have been made from oyster shells and bones and teeth from sheep and cows, probably sourced from local slaughterhouses and butchers. More research will be necessary to discover for certain what the structure was intended to be for, but early interpretation is pointing towards it being a folly, a secluded area to go down to relax, and maybe the lady of the manor would go down there for a bit of peace and quiet. Of this discovery, the current owner said, "We knew something was down there, but not on this scale. I couldn't believe the condition it was in. I'm still wondering how big this garden is, or how overgrown it was allowed to become for this to be missed for a quarter of a century. Also, the current homeowners are planning to sell. Do you think this find will increase or decrease the value?" Staying with news of finds, we have this one, made in Hillingdon in London, along the route of the HS2 railway project. It was found following a rainstorm that changed the ground conditions in a manner that indicated the presence of oxidised metal. Sure enough, a hoard of more than 300 Iron Age coins was found. They have been dated to the 1st century BCE, around the time that Julius Caesar's forces first invaded England. Livia Gershon, writing for SmithsonianMag.com, explains that they were, quote, known as pontins, due to the copper, tin and lead alloy used to make them. Each measure about 1.2 inches in diameter. They show stylized images representing the Greek god Apollo on one side and a charging bull on the other. Further to this, the reader is informed that the hoard's purpose is unclear, as coins were generally not used as currency in 1st century Britain. Instead, notes the statement, bartering was the main method of exchange. The pontins may have represented an offering to the gods, or a method of marking a boundary. Hoards also sometimes acted as emergency savings. Meanwhile, on the Isle of Man, Kath Giles, who is described by LiveScience.com as an amateur treasure hunter and former police officer, has made her 4th historical find. We are told that she has uncovered a Viking age piggy bank hoard that contains a 1,000-year-old analogue to today's Bitcoin. The find is made up of a number of artefacts: silver arm rings, 87 coins, 13 pieces of cut silver, and a significant amount of something known as hack silver. Hack silver is believed to have been useful for international trade because it was practical for any size transaction and was decentralised, a currency without borders or political affiliation. In this sense, its modern-day equivalent is cryptocurrency. We might even say it was something like the original Bitcoin. The entire hoard is currently on display in the new Viking gallery at the Manx Museum, but will soon travel to London, where the Treasure Valuation Committee will review it at the British Museum. Staying with coins, a rare 22-carat gold coin, minted between 1538 and 1541 during the reign of Henry VIII, was auctioned last month through the British auction house Spink and Son. Apparently, the coin has been held in several prominent private collections since the start of the 20th century. Last month, it was sold to an as yet unnamed individual or institution for £64,000. Edmund Gregory, a coin specialist from Spink and Son, states that this is the largest gold coin in Britain and the first English coin to depict a fully dressed king sitting on a throne. He is shown holding a sword and sceptre. The reverse of the coin shows a royal shield with a Tudor rose. This was a prestige coin, announcing the wealth and power of the nation and its monarch to whomever was fortunate or high profile enough for it to cross their palm. The remains of a shipwreck have been located after centuries spent underwater off the coast of Colombia. According to the Express, archaeologists have found the Spanish galleon San José, which sank in flames during a battle with the British on the 8th of June 1709. It went down with 600 souls and an estimated £14 billion worth of gold, silver and jewels. This sunken wealth has led to the wreck being known as the Holy Grail of shipwrecks. Spain is laying claim to the find because it was a Spanish galleon. Colombia is countering that it's theirs because it was found in their waters. However, as Tock Thompson, a professor of anthropology and communication, points out, there is a third argument for ownership, because the treasure on the ship, when it sank, had been looted from the Incan Empire. The dispute between Spain and Colombia has led to the treasure from the wreck remaining unrecovered so far. Another find has had to be reburied by the archaeologists that found it, not due to a legal dispute, but because of lack of funds to secure the find for display in a public exhibit. The find was made on the outskirts of Mexico City and is a tunnel that was part of a flood control system that was constructed to protect Tenochtitlan, widely viewed as the capital of the Aztec Empire from rising waters. In the early years of colonization, the Spanish conquistadors destroyed many of the constructions that predated them as they failed to recognise their ingenuity and necessity. Flooding resulted in reconsideration and reconstruction in the early 1600s. This find featured pre-Hispanic iconography. Its overall architecture suggested the Spanish were in charge of the design. The pandemic is largely responsible for there being insufficient funds to secure the site and put it on display. The reburial is intended to protect it until it can finally be safely excavated. Fingers crossed, it won't be too long before that can happen. Back in the UK, archaeologists from the Royal Agricultural University and Wessex Archaeology have made a fascinating find. Thanks go to Maria Caroscia for once again bringing a cool history news headline to my attention. Following a detailed survey of a near-complete cave house in South Derbyshire, known as the Anchor Church Caves, it is now thought that the complex once housed a 9th century ruler of Northumbria, who became a saint. The 9th century dating has been made in part because the caves are cut from soft sandstone rock, and their narrow doorways and windows resemble Saxon architecture, while a rock-cut pillar is similar to one found in a nearby Saxon crypt. It is believed to be one of the oldest extant domestic interiors in the UK, with doors, floor, roof and windows. The research team's study has been able to reconstruct a house with 3 rooms and a chapel. As Edmund Simons, a research fellow at the RAU, told CNN, there's nowhere else really, at least of that date, where you can walk into somewhere where somebody ate and slept and prayed and lived. One potential inhabitant has been named as the Northumbrian king Eardwulf, who was deposed and exiled in 806. A fragment from a 16th century book states that Eardwulf has a cell in a cliff a little from the Trent, where he lived a religious existence as a hermit. A connection has been made between King Eardwulf and the saint Hardulf. Another find has been made nearly 100 miles northwest of these caves, in Hull, in a grave at the former Trinity burial ground. The find is currently baffling experts. Archaeologists uncovered an intact and sealed blue-coloured glass bottle marked Hull Infirmary that is filled with a brown liquid. It was located between the legs of a skeleton, where it is thought to have been deliberately placed for some reason. The skeleton belonged to a woman who was in her 60s when she died. Her bones show that she suffered from residual rickets and osteoporosis. She was found on a site where burials took place between 1783 and 1861. Tests on the liquid have identified the presence of sodium, potassium and phosphorus. The presence of pharmaceutical materials has been ruled out. Thus, the bottle is thought to contain urine or, possibly, a phosphate-based tonic drink, all of which gives us a suggestion for the what, but not the why. I have to say, my first thought was the witch jar tradition, where various things would be suspended frequently in urine to act as some kind of talisman to protect from and or remove a witch's curse. But what's your guess? Let me know below. Let's hop over to Spain for our next headline. Archaeologists from the University of Murcia have excavated a sarcophagus from the site of a Roman necropolis that is 5 kilometres east of Mulla in Murcia, Spain. Heritage Daily reports that the sarcophagus is 2 metres long and is decorated with a swirling geometric pattern and renderings of ivy leaves, whilst a Cairo symbol was carved on its top, which is a form of Christogram by superimposing the first 2 capital letters, chi and rho, of the Greek word Christos, in such a way that the vertical stroke of the rho intersects with the centre of the chi. It is believed that the sarcophagus dates from the 6th century AD, during a period when waves of Germanic tribes swept through the former Roman territories, amongst them the Visigoths. At some point in the 5th to 7th century CE, under the Visigoths, a small Christian church was built on the site, which once also housed a Roman villa that is thought to have been abandoned around the 5th century CE. Rafael González Fernández, professor of ancient history from the University of Murcia, described the discovery as spectacular and unexpected, which corroborates the previous studies on the chronology of the necropolis. Thomas Cromwell's London house, destroyed in the 1666 Great Fire of London, has been recreated using plans, surveys and property deeds from the Drapers' Company, which eventually acquired the property, and from Cromwell's own archives. This fascinating research project was undertaken by Nick Holder, an historian and research fellow at English Heritage and the University of Exeter. Holder then collaborated with illustrator Peter Urmston to create an artist's impression of the 58-room building. Cromwell's mansion was built on the land that once belonged to the Austin Friars monastery. It is estimated that it would have cost around £1.4 million or $1.9 million in today's money to build from scratch. The works began, we are told, in July 1535. Holder explains that Cromwell, quote, wants a grand London mansion with impressive gateways and bay windows that sort of stick out over the street. CNN reports that, quote, among other impressive features, the mansion included a large armoury with enough weapons to arm 100 men, rich tapestries, a large stair tower, and bedding made of gold, damask, and velvet. Holder adds that his research has also provided greater insight into Cromwell's personal faith, stating, we think of Cromwell as Henry VIII's henchman, carrying out his policy, including closing down the monasteries. And we know that by about 1530, Cromwell became one of the new evangelical Protestants. Perhaps not the word I'd use, but certainly reformer. But when you look at the inventory of his house in the 1520s, he doesn't seem such a religious radical. He seems more of a traditional English Catholic. He's got various religious paintings on the wall. He's got his own holy relic, which is very much associated with traditional Catholics, not with the new evangelicals. And he's even got a home altar. In the 1520s, he seems like much more of a conventional early Tudor Catholic gentleman. When Cromwell fell from power and was executed in 1540, Henry confiscated the property and sold it to the Drapers' Company. Within months, the king wrote to the new owners, demanding that they send him the damson plum tree from his former favourite's garden. The property was also recently brought to life through Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall trilogy. In the various moments when we encounter Cromwell in his London mansion of Austin Friars. Next up, a reminder to check your wardrobe, cellar, attic, or any other nooks and crannies, because last month a story broke of the discovery of a work of art attributed to Picasso, found in a closet in Maine. It had been there for 50 years. It's thought to be a preliminary mock-up for a monumental stage curtain painted in 1919 for the ballet Le Tricorne, or the Three-Cornered Hat. The piece recently sold at auction for $150,000. The buyer has chosen to remain anonymous, but will, no doubt, want the purchase to be authenticated as a Picasso. And this can only be achieved by submitting it to be examined by the artist's son and sole authenticator, Claude Ruiz Picasso. According to SmithsonianMag.com, the buyer has at least 120 days to submit the work for appraisal. Last but by no means least, I want us to look at a couple of exhibitions that are using techniques from digital technology to create immersive experiences. One allows people to explore the Sistine Chapel, the other to explore selected works by Van Gogh. Both digital exhibitions have been on show elsewhere in the world. The Van Gogh one recently opened in London and will remain on display until February 2022. It is also currently running in New York. The Sistine Chapel exhibition will land in London this October. So, is this the future of exhibitions? The possibility that, like a cinema release, it could be experienced by people from across the globe at exactly the same time. I see these techniques as offering meaningful ways to interact with culturally significant objects, without those objects needing to actually physically be in front of an exhibition goer. And that leads me to question, what might the use of these techniques, the example of these exhibitions, mean for those institutions that are refusing to return the cultural objects of other nations? For those institutions that claim it is their responsibility to ensure that those physical objects remain on public display. So what do you think of any or all of the headlines we've looked at today? Were there any headlines that caught your eye in July that I didn't discuss in this video? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comments section underneath this video, or you can find me on social media. I'll leave links to the other places you can find me on the internet in my description box. Follow me over on some or all of them so we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, why not share it with your friends? Please also let me know by hitting the thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. And if you think you're subscribed, can you just have a little check now? Make sure that YouTube hasn't mysteriously unsubscribed you. While you're there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, why not hit the bell icon beside the subscribe button so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.